really impressive, the work that you guys have done just in a few years. I guess it makes sense that San Francisco would be a city that like leads on data and technology. Seems like you guys have done some really great work. So yeah, I guess for this, love to just chat to understand a little bit more of the stuff that y'all have built, and then maybe just talk just a little bit about um, ways that we can do also some of the stuff in kind of a Web3 native way, and what maybe a next generation of pushing some of this data stuff forward might look like. So I guess first question is, I guess like there's a lot of interoperability and work just to get alignment between like these different departments, right? The city of San Francisco is huge, but not all of the work that's being done that affects the city is being done like by the departments themselves, right? And there are all of these nonprofits and other organizations. Each one of those has their own kind of data systems and things. So what does that generally look like? How do these third-party organizations both, I guess, consume data from the city and also, I guess, contribute data to, the different departments?
That's a really good question. I think so. Starting even just within the city and its A to Z services, because it's a city and county, right? Um, Building up those, so basically, like what is the service that is being provided, and basically who's providing that service is kind of like the first step. It's like mapping that out. And then if there are nonprofits or other organizations that are also helping to support that, right, to augment that or to work together in partnership, right? Like we don't have a full scan of that. And I think it's really just starting with like, what is baseline and how are we actually working together? And then begin to have those conversations around what are our common goals, right? And what are the outcomes that we are trying to achieve both collectively and individually as organizations? And then begin the hard work of setting data standards, because that is the pivotal thing that will either make or break a platform. Is that if we have, or if you have very talented machine learning you know, data scientists, engineers, that can certainly help. I think having a team that knows how to work and to harmonize data that's kind of like all over the place, so that can certainly help. Tech can certainly help, but I think the hard work is really around coming together. Look alongside you, right? Like who are the people that you work with on a day in and day out basis at a partnership level, or who should you be partnering with, right? And then begin to share, right? Like your goals and your outcomes. Are we providing complementary care and services, or are we providing duplicative services or supportive services? And then really begin to see where those overlaps might be and partner, right? Like that's where the power is. And then we can begin to see how we are actually, like, so in real time, right? Like the client who needs help has to go to all of these organizations, right? So if we just change the paradigm of how we view service delivery to really focus on the end user and say, okay, how do we make that better? And then work backwards, right? Like who are all of the people and all of the organizations that need to, that we are having this person have to go and navigate this all by themselves. And there's like no one stop shop, right? Like it depends on who they know or how well they know the system. And so that becomes very difficult. So, I would say that, map it out, map out the services, find out who those partners are or could be, and then really begin those conversations. One of the upsides of that is that you can ask for funding together, right? Like there is benefit to scale, right? And joining forces if that's an opportunity there.
Yeah, so you've mentioned a few times data governance, which it does seem like that's one of the like big things to really work on. It's one of the things we think about a lot, and it's defining standards, right? Because if you have different departments, you have different organizations, and they use different terms for things, or maybe the same terms mean different things,
Yeah.
right, in different contexts, right? Are people familiar with the concept of domain-driven design? It's a very technical kind of concept, so I'm guessing probably most people haven't, but there's like books that have been written on this. And it gets to, right, it's something we think a lot about at Geo, and we went through about ontologies, right? So like the names that we give to things and how we structure information. And so one of the core ideas with domain-driven design is that, you know, any concepts that you come up with, they live within a certain scope, right? It's, you know, within this industry, this term means this, but maybe in a different industry, you know, if we're talking housing and you're talking about a unit, then you're thinking that that means like, you know, a unit of housing, but maybe the same word unit means something else if you're, you know, in food service or something like that. So within different industries, but also within maybe just different companies or different, you know, the terminology can be different. So standardizing on those things is a big thing. I'm curious, like within like the city of San Francisco, are there processes that you've put in place that are still happening where, you know, it's like on what cadence do different departments kind of sync up, have these discussions, evolve like the schemas, right? You know, the fields that they're collecting or things like that. Like how often does that stuff change and what kind of processes are in place?
So one of the things that that I instituted was data working groups around services. So folks actually have to meet to talk about what are your priorities, what are the gaps in the data, how are you collecting that data, and is there any movement on improving the overall data quality? Because that's the outcome that we're looking for. That's what we monitor for, right? It's like, is the quality up or have things changed? Do we know, can we now measure timeline? Like very basic things. And so, yes, so it's really bringing people together around those domains and really sharing, you know, what it is that they're collecting, what are their key metrics, and then really begin that hard process of defining things. And so that is ongoing. I don't
Is
think
that
that'll
like
ever stop.
quarterly or it depends on departments?
It really depends on the domain. So street crisis response, homelessness and street crisis, they meet weekly. They have to meet weekly because that's how, well, they have to meet weekly anyway because they have to share information around like, okay, you know, who are your top 20 individuals, right? Like, is that the same person on your list and this list and that list, right? Like, so, you know, in parallel, working on a data science project to really help to automate some of those things to really get more accurate count on like identity and that sort of thing, and where people are flowing through the process. But yes, so it really just depends on the cadence, or excuse me, on the service.
Right. And are those meetings just like, you know, city employees or you know, people from outside organizations ever involved in those?
Most, I would say, I haven't seen a case where there was an outside. Well, actually, there's an exception to that. So the city has what's called the Office of Civic Innovation, where they actually do partner with a tech company. They put out these projects where they invite for like 16 weeks. I believe it's 16 weeks, to have a tech company work on a problem. It's usually a data problem, right? And so in those cases, you know, that's where you would see an outside come in and really help to support and really have some concentrated effort to push out a project to improve either data quality or service delivery. But the majority of the time, it's staff because they're the one, because this is really operational. It's like, what are we doing this week? What are we doing? How did we do last week? Right. Like, and then how do we improve that? Like, where do we need to prioritize our resources over the coming weeks? So it's really just focused on staff. But I can see where there might be value in actually inviting the community, but I think that would need to be really thought out and structured in a way. Yeah.
Okay, great. So curious just a little bit on the tech side. So I'm guessing each department probably has different like, you know, software and stuff that they use internally. So
Yes.
most of the interchange that's kind of happening there, so it's sharing like data sets. Like how much of that is like files that are being passed around versus I guess using the like API endpoints and what does that kind of interoperability look like?
So the rule of thumb is we meet staff where they are, and then we skill them up because we need their data in whatever state it is. And so what we found is that the more sophisticated departments are the ones like the hospitals, the Metropolitan Transportation Agency, like those who have engineers already embedded or epidemiologists already, like scientists already embedded or analysts embedded already in there. The ones that are have the spreadsheet on a desktop, like we'll still get it, right? But then we work with them on a data quality improvement plan. Like, hey, can we get you onto like a form, on an online form that we can then connect to more in real time? So then as they are updating their data, it actually updates the open data portal at a cadence.
And then you have databases as part of the open data portal where you'll load the data into, or is
Yeah.
it the raw data sets and then people kind of load it into their own databases?
So the tech stack that we use is Snowflake and DBT. So for non technical folks, that's basically like you need a space. So we don't want to touch the raw data like directly. We don't want to crash a production system. So what we will do is we will make a copy, or basically mirror that data into our system, so where we can actually like transform it or combine it or integrate it with other data sets, so that we can actually have like a data set that actually tells a story around a service, and then make that available on the platform.
So, I mean, that's pretty much like state of the art in like, data engineering right now. So that's really cool to see, that the city's kind of, at the boundary there of best practices for data. I think, one of the things that, we're doing with Web3 is, we're trying to build also kind of the next generation of data systems. And obviously we're still very early on as an industry. But I do think that like government use cases are some of the most interesting for blockchain technology, right? Because the whole point of blockchains is, well, one, you have transparency and accountability, and that's goal of public government services as well, and it really is like public infrastructure, right? So like from an architecture perspective, right? Like, maybe the city of San Francisco is kind of, it's a public entity that, a city is serving the people, the residents of San Francisco. But the tech stack, right? It's centralized systems, right? There's an administrator of that database, and right, that's how the web itself is architected. Whereas with decentralized networks, things like blockchains, right? It's these open public systems, right? Themselves, which I think would be really interesting to think about. Like, at some point, a city is going to run on a blockchain, right? And like, it's open public infrastructure that different people can participate in, improve, contribute to, and use. And so it's kind of like a next generation, it's thing that's coming up, but we're obviously very kind of early there. And so we're doing like experiments with some of the stuff, and part of the work that we're doing with DAOs, you could think of as being part of that like data governance kind of stuff, right? Where the DAOs themselves can have lots of different participants, can be the different nonprofits, can be city employees, can be all different sorts of people who are then coming to like agreement on standards, and knowledge and information itself. And we do think about kind of privacy and public information. So with Web3, it is kind of a it's part of the promise of the technology is you can have things that are truly kind of like privacy first, privacy preserving, while also having the stuff that's public. And for the stuff that's public, you don't have to like trust some organization that they're providing the right data, because it's anchored on a public blockchain, and everybody can kind of verify for themselves, right? They can see who published this data point. And I think one thing that'll be really interesting is when we can have like many to many production and consumption of the data, right? Because we have obviously all of these departments. We also have all of these organizations and nonprofits, and then we have individuals, right? I mean, there's 800,000 residents of the city of San Francisco. So what does it look like in a more massively distributed way if we have a goal like street cleanliness, and anybody can upload a photo of this block or this area needs some help or whatever. Anybody can like contribute to the data set, right? Live in real time, city services can come in and provide services. So I think those are like some of the ideas of, some of the things that we're trying to do in Web3 and maybe some new tools that we can kind of bring to this. And then one of the last big things that we at Geo are doing is work with knowledge graphs. Is that kind of a concept that you guys have looked at all?
I think that's Data SF 3.0. I think right now it's really just getting all of the departments to baseline, right? Like not just sharing any old data, but like the critical data that like really answers the question, like how are you doing in terms of your service delivery? Does the city need to continue to invest or not invest? Like that's really where we're at right now. And then I think at some point, hopefully things will kind of normalize over time. But I agree. I mean, I think, if we can begin to visualize where these intersections are, right, and then really how to transform government, right, service into a place where we are very streamlined. People are getting the services that they need. We clearly see where the gaps are. So do we solve for that or not? Right? How do we pivot? Right? Like, and I think that there's extreme value to that. So I think the work that you all are doing right now is really kind of setting that stage to get it turnkey ready. Right?
Yeah, so it's exciting to know about this incredible resource, and I mean, I can only imagine the effort to get all these different city departments aligned and producing like all of this like organized information. And then I think what we can continue to kind of add on top is, I mean, one, processing a lot of that information, deriving insights from that, I think is something that a wider community can help to kind of contribute to that effort. But then also, that works well when the structure of the information is decided ahead of time, right? So and a group can meet and say, okay, these are the fields we're going to collect, and this is the information that we're going to produce. But then to allow lots of different participants in an ecosystem to figure out how do we want to extend this and what else can we add to that and what additional insights do we want to derive. That's something that hopefully our Web3 kind of community can help with, and we can grow this kind of global graph, right, of organized knowledge and information that can be used by lots of people in the city, and we can work together to achieve our shared goals.
I'm very excited about that.
Thank you, guys. It was amazing. Thank you for the conversation. Michelle, thank you.